Well, hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Min here, Chief Scouting Officer from Nobody Studios. And here we are again. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, man.
So I am stepping in today for Sejal, Chief Culture Officer, and couldn't have chosen a better topic to discuss today. It's all about the mantra of pitches. So as Chief Scouting Officer, it pretty much is my life. Listening to ideas, listening to pitches, meeting founders, and seeing what people are cooking up, but also how they're aligning with what we're developing in the studio. So I'm really looking forward to all of your questions for me and Mark about the topic of pitching. And we're going to get straight into this because, Mark, I think since the first time we ever met, you spoke to me about the art of storytelling, and also about pitching and getting really good with your story, because in not just the traditional sense of doing a pitch for investors, it just makes you a lot sharper in really understanding what it is that you believe in, what you want to do, and getting your vision out there. So that mantra about pitching early, pitching often is certainly something that sort of really I totally agree with. So can you share a little bit with everyone who's listening in today about the origins around that philosophy, and maybe just breaking it down a little bit more around your thinking on the whole pitching early and pitching often, please?
Yeah, we've talked on an earlier episode where I touched on this a little bit, which was I think a lot of founders, it's not uncommon for a founder to make a mistake of saying, well, once this is all ready, then I'm going to start pitching, right? And they're trying to get mock-ups done, or they're trying to get some proof point, or they're trying to get some press release out. They're just trying to get everything perfect in their story. And I get that, but really what the mantra means is start telling your story early, even when it's not perfect, right? I've addressed for founders something they don't really understand a lot of times, which is a venture capitalist will often look at like 200 or 300 deals a year, right? And they might end up doing like 3 or 4 deals. So they're going to go from those 300 or 400, or they're going to narrow it down to like 20. They're going to go deeper on. And then only 10% of them are going to make the cut to possible investment. So you have to understand as a entrepreneur that part of the game here is VCs and investors are seeing lots of deal flow. A very, very, very small percentage of them they're ever going to do. And it has nothing to do with you, right? It could be that, they already have something in that category. It could be that's not within their category. It could be they don't do deals with people who went to this certain school. They don't do deals with companies who are out of this certain country or geographic area. There's so many different things to get from 300 pitches down to like 3 that they're like called fast filters, right? But also VCs do it because it's literally part of their game, and their not game is the wrong word, but it's part of their job is to be informed about what's going on. So they learn and they see and they get a sense of the market. And it's one of these things that you start to be able to do well. And you see, I've seen like 5 deals in a similar space in the last week. That's telling me something, but then you see something unique. Like it helps your kind of deal acumen as an investor. But I say the flip side is just as important, especially in the earliest days. An investor can educate you as an entrepreneur 100 times as long as you're willing to like get things wrong, right? So I do think early on, it's okay to be like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're thinking about, this is where we're at. We're not quite ready for, maybe this stage of investment. But, this is about finding more friendly folks or people who will, give you some coaching, but you can learn a lot from investors and VCs. And I can't even lost track of, how many times I went into a pitch and thought I knew how to, tell my story, and we fell on our face. And the investors are asking tough questions that you weren't ready for, or you do know the answer, but it just wasn't the tip of your tongue, or you didn't have a supporting material, and you walk away from that smarting, right? You come away like a little bit of bruise, and you're like, oh, okay. But a good entrepreneur is working on those slides that night and turning them around and making sure that the next one's not going to be like that. And it's just, I mean, it's again happened countless times in my career where, yeah, there was a painful miss with maybe one investor presentation, but 5 investor presentations later, someone asks you a question and you're able to nail it and your story flows. And so that's really what it means to me by pitch early and pitch often is you almost want to look at some of the potential pitches where it may not be a perfect fit are just going to be like boot camp. It's like training material for you as an entrepreneur to get your story right, to get your pitch down, to see the things like even the best of us, it's really easy to be too close to an idea, to see the things that people don't get or the context they're not getting, or it's really easy to go in and talk too much about a specific industry. So you're using acronyms or using assumptions that investors aren't connecting the dots on. It's like, there's no way to like pull yourself from the trees in the forest unless you're actually, in my opinion, pitching early, pitching often. And if you see it as a fundamental development skill to getting your, and even your idea right, because you'll hear things, investors will be like, yeah, I just heard a pitch from someone saying something similar, a guy who just left X company. And you'll hear stuff about deal flow. You hear something about people moving in the market. You'll get a sense of what they have a sense for, and it just makes you, way better. So I just do believe that when I've seen early stage companies especially struggle, it's not uncommon to hear a founder say, well, we haven't really pitched too many people, or I pitched my uncle and my brother, but we haven't really gone broad yet because we're waiting for X. And it's always, I'm like, you know what, let's talk to 10 people this next week. Let's learn, right? It's so valuable. But I do think people go into it thinking, I've got to get this pitch right. And if I get it right, I get the investment. And that's absolutely not the case. At the end of the day, it's still a numbers game. Don't get me wrong. I like to be targeted. I like to be smart about who you go after, and that can increase your percentages, but it's still going to be a numbers game. And part of that value of the numbers game is just getting practice and getting your story good.
Yeah, no, totally. Now, one of the things that I've read and truly believe in as well is, psychologically, if you're meeting like an investor or whoever it is, they don't know anything about you, and there's really like 7 sort of touch points where it's like turning a no to a yes, and it's not going to be literally from 30 seconds. Someone's going to say, "That's amazing. Here's £1 million. Take my money right now." Right. So I think some people, to that point of they want to fit so much stuff into a pitch because they think this is the one opportunity they have to get across their story. What for you would you kind of categorize a pitch? What is the purpose really for a pitch? Because it's not just a one shot and then you're done, right? It should be something that leads to the next conversation.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's the number one purpose of a pitch deck. Now, a pitch might be different, but a deck, what you're putting together, the number one purpose is just to get interest and open the door, right? And so it should be compelling and exciting and interesting enough, showing some traction. You should give an encapsulation of the market, a rough outline of your business model. But this stuff is, I mean, there's 1,000 websites that'll talk about these kind of rough formats, but I still think probably the owner of this idea, early on was Guy Kawasaki. And, his site's full of great information, guykawasaki.com. But, I'm not sure that even some of the stuff he put out years ago, I'm not so sure I disagree with a lot of those things. I think not much has changed, right? He has a rule that I have been saying for a while. I just didn't realize I was repeating his rule. It's called the 10-20-30 rule. And he says the average pitch should be 10 slides. It should last only 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And there shouldn't be any more than 30-point copy or larger in the deck.
True.
And that last one I've said a lot because, like I think you said, you see a pitch deck or stuff, and there's so much material, minutia. It feels like you're looking at a project plan, right?
Yeah.
And when you realize that, like I would probably even say 40-point copy or 48-point copy.
Yeah.
There's a real forcing function when you do that because you don't have very much space on a slide. And what you're trying to do is make these big kind of almost advertising type statements. The other thing I say often, which is just if you get your deck right, those big titles, think of them as one handoff to the other. So if all someone is doing is reading the titles of each slide, they should be getting the story. That's 10 sentences or 10 titles that adds up to the story, big market, early traction, cool team, like, some basic things that forces you to be very creative with what you want to highlight. So let's say let's say a channel partnership relationship was key to your strategy, right? Or multiple relationships like that. Well, you can imagine a slide that's got, 20 partners and different statuses and sub bullets and details and all that other stuff. Or you could have early traction, 2 signed, 6 more by the end of the year, and some logos. Like, you kind of want to, err more on the storytelling side. And I think that's just, super important. But again, there's some great, examples like Guy Kawasaki is a great starting point, but it just helps you stay focused. And if you find yourself getting into the minutia, or you don't feel like you have enough room on the slide, you need to change your mindset. I think the asterisk on that 10 slide rule is that you can have lots of great supporting material.
Yes, of
right?
course. Use that
And
for the
so, again, you're trying to get someone to care about that next stage. So if they get through it and they're like, okay, this is interesting, I want to talk, then you want to make sure that your verbal, or whether it be in this kind of format or even in person, that you're nailing. Storytelling is as important as ever. Usually the person explaining, I think something that's more important today than it was even when Guy Kawasaki first came up with that rule is I think people are looking a lot more at the why behind the team. Does this team have, it used to be, is this team the right team to pull this off?
Yeah.
Right. And 10 or 20 years ago, definitely felt like pitches were more idea validation and then diving into the team. Right. But now I think there's this extra step now. It's like, not only do I believe, could they pull it off? Do I believe they will? Like, am I finding this fire or this why behind that's going to bring this to life? Right. And that's where the presenters are usually going to be a senior founder or executive. The presenter being able to passionately, sometimes it's a backstory that leads into the pitch. Every pitch is completely different in the big scheme of things. It's like the setup, at least, right?
Yes.
But once you get into the pitch, this is where that practice comes into play. Your story can rattle off your tongue, and the main points. You have conviction about them. They feel compelling when they're heard. The one point builds off the other, and it kind of takes people down I listen. And you've heard me doing pitches on our journey as well. And certainly there can be sometimes 30 or 40 minutes of bantering and small talk and relationship building. I think that's super important. But when it gets to, okay, let me tell you what we've done, I'm through that pretty tight in about 12, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's usually people down their head going, wow, that's really compelling. And now they're ready to digest additional information. Right. And to that extent, we've got, different videos recorded from different people in the company explaining different parts. There's, an FAQ question, in there. There's a more detailed financial model. There's all those things, but you don't start there.
No, that's all.
We have this thing called napkin level kind of thinking. Like, if you just had to write stuff on a napkin and you only had 10 napkins and you wanted to walk person through this kind of storyboard, and this is why this is compelling, that's the way to think of your pitch deck.
Yes, totally. Yeah. A bit like the elevator pitch. We call it a lift over here, but same kind of thing. Yeah. So I'm going to take you back. So obviously, as a serial entrepreneur, you've also done your fair share of pitches, through obviously even before the studio. So I wonder if you have a story around a particular pitch that didn't really go to plan, and what happened there and what the learnings were, if I can put you on the spot, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have a whole bunch of them, right? I think that I'm trying to maybe boil up a couple of elements, right? I think that there's at least one, and I'm top of my mind, that was a very, very large top name VC and kind of royalty in Silicon Valley. And I'd worked the relationship with his team and all this other stuff to get that, opportunity to present to him. But I spent months with his team, and I had a good relationship with a couple of people who were kind of deciding what he sees, what they don't see, and other things. And I was so excited to finally get my chance, because I already felt like there was a lot of excitement from the team, and then a lot of momentum in a deal, right? And I really also thought we were just a perfect fit for the kind of stuff he likes.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest mistakes walking out of there, because I realized it didn't go well, and he was cordial and he asked good questions, and we ended up with okay, well, keep us in touch, but that's always that's a death, that's a death message pitch.
Yeah.
But not always. Actually, there's a lot of people that like to see a deal early and like to see it progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can definitely go. The opening to all of those is keep them up to date and how you did what you said you're going to do. And most veteran VCs, although it's moved to be a little bit faster these days, but most like to see you do what you said. So they prefer to see a deal 6 months before they're actually going to invest, and they watch you evolve. They watch the product evolve. They want to understand your thought processes, your pivots, the evolution of the team. So pitching early can lead to a perfect investment down the road. But in that particular case, what I had mistaken, and it was an early kind of founder mistake, was all the work and prep work I'd done before that with the team and his surrounding team, who are all very credible, smart people, senior people.
Sure.
Somehow walking in that room, I felt like it preceded me, all that work, and it didn't.
Okay.
He was definitely like, okay, what do I care? Tell me what you got. Wow. And I was like, I was definitely starting from zero.
Right.
And I think one, that rattled me. Two, I don't think I had the talk track in my head to go that way, because I felt like, oh, we've been talking to you guys for months. Now I'm just here to, see the master. And I just think that was one of those scenarios where I look back afterwards and I was like, I was not prepared for that. I thought I got thrown off my game. He definitely was more aggressive than I expected, given all the work we'd already done. But it was just a mistaken assumption on my part. Right, and I think you always need to be ready to go, slay a deal. And that's why the story has to be so tight. I think even going into that one, I got a little more creative because I felt so warm with his team. And he was like an idol of mine. So I felt like I'd known him my whole career. And so it's this even bigger letdown for me, because I, put him on that pedestal. But anyway, those are the kind of things you can avoid if you just, also don't hesitate to be, challenged and tested by other mentors or a board member or another investor. Sometimes you can get too close to the trees, the forest. In that particular case, I probably had a narrative in my head about how it was just teed up to go perfectly. And I was not probably as prepared for the adversity of that particular meeting. But yeah, no, I think you always have to be ready to close a deal, and you have to be ready to tell your story. And that's why the practice is so important. I mean, I also think there's another thing in particular when I look at other deals that maybe didn't go well. And this is where I was going back to the why. I mean, there's a few transactions that I've been involved with earlier in my career where let's just say I was more of like a transactional startup executive, where I was like, oh, I can help these guys. This is gonna be a cool deal. I can definitely, but it wasn't like I had a deep passion behind the why for that particular product. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And I also don't think that there's any substitute for that, at least at a senior level. I mean, you can be a helping person, an investor, an advisor. You can be those things on like arm's length. But if you're going to be a focused, senior executive, and you don't have that why to tap into, there's just kind of no faking it. I really believe that, and I think it's one of the reasons why the studio has resonated, because people know how much we believe in what we're doing, and the track record and the history and the scars that made us believe that. And it's also kind of not up for negotiation. Like, we're not chasing the latest whims of the market. We definitely have conviction with the things that we're saying and doing, and people feel that. But anything less than that, people feel it, right? And so I think that again, just as more important than ever, that if you're getting involved in a startup, to do that deep soul searching, because there's going to be adversity, there's going to be twists in the round, and I think more than ever, investors are asking, is this person going to stick through it?
Yeah. Which perfectly sort of brings me to my next question, which is, rejection really is part of that process, right? You're not going to be successful and land every single, pitch that you do. But then how can you kind of, make that a bit of a superpower in kind of handling rejection and using feedback to kind of improve and go again? Because I guess as a founder, you kind of need that grit. Otherwise, it's probably not the right place for you.
Oh, 100%. I mean, first of all, I think there's a difference between um, painful feedback, constructive
Mm.
feedback, even if it's wrapped with rejection. I think there's a big difference between that and
Yeah.
being an
Yes.
asshole.
Yes.
So there are times investors are assholes, and I usually just don't put a whole lot of energy in that, right?
Mm. Mm.
I just feel like energetically, if people want to like poke you in the eye and poke you in the ribs and like be more painful, I
Mm.
just don't think there's a place for it. I don't think it's required, right?
Mm. Mm.
But
Mm.
I've certainly had people say, you know what, it's a no for me, but I want to, give you some feedback on why. And I think that that's super valuable, super important. And if I think that they're missing something, then I'll just say, look, not going to change your mind, but I failed to present this, or this is a slide that addresses that question you just said. Like, they are dialogues. It's okay to make sure you answer, but then take the coaching and say, honestly, it's on me if I didn't get that across in my pitch. So I really appreciate the feedback. It's going to make me better. But I think that has to be genuine, right? But you
Mm.
almost have to embrace, again, pitch early, pitch often. Every one of these are going to make you stronger, right? And
Totally.
Michael Jordan says he's missed more basketball shots than anybody on the planet,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I believe that, that's the way you have to think about it. Now, you can be learning and resilient, but the other thing is, don't let the other extreme be a blow. If somebody says some tough things or mean things, or
Mm.
you guys don't believe in your team, or that product is dog shit, or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah.
can hear some tough things on the pitch.
Yeah.
Be also, and part of being resilient is being able to throw things out the window and not suffer them, right?
Yeah.
And I do think a lot of founders feel so intimately involved with their babies that
Yes.
feedback is hard to receive. And I just think that you need to elevate above that to make sure the good stuff filters through.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's a match as well, right? It's got to be a two-sided conversation.
100%. That's what I was going to say. At the end of the day, you're also trying to find the right investor.
Yeah. 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 No, totally. You mentioned that there's certain elements of when you're doing a pitch, the set format of things that you want to include in your 10-minute pitch, 20 if you're fortunate. For you, what really stands out? What's the bit that you focus on, and advice to budding founders to say, obviously there's a whole bunch of stuff that you typically would cover. What really, in your experience, are the ones that you really should focus on?
Yeah, I think when a lot of people say it has to be 10 slides, a lot of people are looking at their 39-page deck and going, oh gosh, I've got some
That's
work to
right.
do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that those 10 are meant to be the basics, right?
Yeah.
But think of it in terms of a story as well, not individual slides, right?
Mm,
So,
mm,
it's usually the classic two to start with is, problem and solution, right?
mm,
This is the problem that's, in the market, and this is how we solve it, right?
mm.
Then specifics about how you solve it, or any kind of secret sauce. Yeah, everybody's trying to solve it, but we found
Yeah.
this flex capacitor that no one else has, and it
Yeah.
allows us to travel back in time. You just need to
Mm,
put bananas in it. So you,
yeah.
you want to go down this path of, okay, I got the problem. Oh, I see how that's the solution. Oh, you guys are on to some secret sauce, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it goes into, let me talk about early traction, right? Or usually it's like, let me talk about the business model. We're going to solve this problem, and this is how it's going to be a lucrative opportunity. And by the way, here's, some early traction all along those ways. So it could be either partners, early customers, whatever, revenue. Here's the team behind it, right? And then you're going to get into usually a high level business model. But the thing I always tell people, again, all at your stage, but also what you want to put in the slides versus what you want as like appendix material,
Mm,
is you're still just trying to like lead to the next conversation.
totally.
At some point, stage one or stage two, stage three of that VC's interest or that investor's interest, they're going to say, okay, I want to see more docs. And then
Mm,
you have the right to answer a whole bunch of more detailed questions. Get on a due diligence call. If they have a question, put on your technologist. How are you going to go to market? Let's talk to our marketing person or our salesperson. So you have all those times to go deeper, but you should be summarizing them. And I think, Guy Kawasaki's guidance was even before mobile became so dominant. But now by looking at like DocSend and stuff, you can see that almost 60-70% of pitch decks are being viewed now on a mobile. So that's
yes.
even more compelling that
Yeah.
you need to have big statements, you know, that someone can follow real quick and think they're thumbing through it 4, 5, 6, 7 slides, 8 slides, 9 slides, and they're going, okay, cool, sounds cool, let's set up an appointment, or not a fit for us, but thanks, right? So you need to be able to get across those main things. So you can't be thinking of anything all that complex or detailed, but you can't be so generic either. I think if you think of those titles, I do think you can have problem and solution. You can have that more creative titles, but you still need to cover that kind of flow. That's where the storytelling can come in. I think people need to look at a pitch deck a little bit more like advertising
100%.
than a detailed business plan, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for me, you know, listening to pitches every day, I really like it when the founder, you know, focuses a lot on the problem, and then I can resonate with that problem rather than the ones that go with, oh look, we've got 30 features already and they're already into solution mode. As they say, you know, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And you know, a little bit like when, you know, you're interviewing, you know, staff for a role, and you know, there's statistics about most people literally within the first, you know, 30 seconds have already got a strong judgment, and then it's really difficult, positive or negative, to kind of change that. I think it's the same for a pitch deck, in that you know, that the start is really super critical, because otherwise they'll be just wondering what they're having for lunch or dinner, or their mind's gone elsewhere. So one of the worst ones I saw is just this thing where it was literally like 30 slides, and they just thought the VCs had, you know, as much time as they wanted to, and yeah, obviously, like they got a sharp shock when the you know, the VC said, yeah, you know, thanks.
Yeah, and I think we send all of our documents out on DocSend, so you can see, you know, how long they opened it, how much time they spent in a document and stuff. And these are stats anybody can Google, but I think it's something like the average pitch deck people look at less than 2 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
And so again, that's what you have to work with, right?
Exactly.
And so you could think you could be more compelling and make people stop everything and clear their calendar and spend 30 minutes on your deck, but you're being a fool.
No.
You need to just make sure it gets across enough that there's, you know, high intrigue. And so that's where you got to just really challenge the storytelling. Now, there are fantastic founders who don't have that inherently in their skill set either, right?
Yes.
You have great companies built by technologists. So if that's not something you bring to the table, you just need to bring it, right? You need to find an advisor, a marketing consultant. There's a number of great people out there that do pitches, you know, and decks and even training. You can't value getting that right, you know? So again, fill the weakness somehow so that you get good at that.
Totally agree. I think as humans as well, you know, where our attention spans are getting shorter. I think, you know, statistically it's been shown they're less than a goldfish now. And, you know, the TikTok generation of like, give me the shorts, give it me, you know, is really, again, to your point of, you know, most people only look at a pitch deck for, you know, a minute or two and then sort of decide if it's worth looking at that. So kind of having that crisp message is super important. So time's ticking, and I think I'm going to squeeze in one more question, if that's okay. Sure. And let's look into the future. So what emerging trends, or where can you see this going in terms of the pitching? What emerging trends are you seeing in terms of how you're seeing, you know, VCs will want to digest this information going forward in terms of a pitch, and how should we be, you know, iterating and changing how we have this interaction?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm not sure. I think the core content that we just talked about is going to be the same.
It's going to be the
format. I think storytelling will be more important than ever.
Mm-hmm.
I am believing that we're moving more into a video world, you know, of pitches. I really believe that's going to become more and more a requirement. If you look at like the growth of crowdfunding, you know, it wasn't even a market 4 or 5 years ago. We were one of the first venture studios to do crowdfunding. We'll continue to bet on crowdfunding in the future for our portfolio as well. Yes. But almost every deal on a crowdfunding platform requires some kind of a video, right? And if you get it right, that's like that 20-minute pitch and 10 slides down to like 90 seconds or 2 minutes, except it's got, some movement and some action and some music and, flashy transitions. Again, I'm probably more inclined to want to see that to decide if I want to go deeper with somebody, right? And I think that, it's ironic because crowdfunding is more for a non-sophisticated or non-accredited investor. But to your point, that's where the market is in terms of attention span. And I think that's where sophisticated investors have gotten too. They're all overmaxed. They're all, too much on their calendar, traveling too much. Like you said, you might look at 10 decks in a week, trying to figure which one of those you want to put a call on the calendar for. It's hard. And we're probably not giving a lot of decks even as much attention as they deserve. So the idea that you can combine founder voice, you can, add a little bit of pizzazz to something and, basically ask someone to commit 90 seconds to watch a video and see if they're interested. I think you're going to see more and more of that moving forward.
Yeah. Well, when I first discovered the studio nearly 2 years ago, first thing I did was I went to the website and I saw the video that, you had created. And it just kind of straight away just kind of synced and thought, wow, this is intriguing. I need to know more. So spot on. Fantastic. So I think, look at that. We are well overdue. So I think that's another great session today with you, Mark. Thank you as always.
Thank you, man.
Thanks for letting me sit in, Sejal. And I shall look forward to seeing you all again real soon. Thanks, everyone. Cheers now. Bye, Mark.